This is Taiwan Talk.
This is Taiwan Talk on ICRT.
I'm Eric Smith, and this is Taiwan Talk. Cheryl Robbins has spent the last several decades in Taiwan, and her scholastic research led to a passion for Taiwan's indigenous cultures. This year, she published a travel guidebook in the hopes that more members of Taiwan's international community will begin exploring these magnificent and unspoiled regions of this beautiful island. I recently spoke with Miss Robbins about her newly published book. You recently wrote a book called A Foreigner's Travel Guide to Taiwan's Indigenous Areas.
Yes.
Central and Southern Taiwan are the main focus of that book. I guess the first question I should ask is, what got you interested in the subject in general?
Well, I've been in Taiwan for 23 years. And I guess what got me interested in this subject was in 1997, I started working for the National Museum of Natural Science in Taichung as an English language tour guide and translator. And in that museum, we have a permanent exhibition on Austronesian peoples, including Taiwan's indigenous peoples. So as I started to research the contents of that exhibition to introduce it to people who came to the museum, I started to become more and more interested in the subject. And then started asking some of our ethnologists on staff and also some of indigenous coworkers.
So was there a reason why you only stuck to Central and Southern Taiwan? Was it because it's just too big of a subject to cover, or is there something special about Central and Southern Taiwan?
Well, actually, this is the first of a series of 3 books.
Oh, okay.
So the next book to come out is Hualien and Taidong area, and then the third one will be Northern Taiwan. It was too big a subject to cover in just one book and to be a guidebook that wasn't too heavy. So the publisher and I decided that we would break it up into 3 smaller books.
Okay. What was some of the things that surprised you during your exploration of Taiwan's indigenous areas?
Well, not much surprises me anymore. I've been traveling to Taiwan's indigenous areas for about the last 15 years. But every time I go, it's always a new experience. When you go to travel to indigenous areas, you have to be very flexible because sometimes the people you've arranged to meet or the things you've arranged to do don't pan out because of weather, because of whatever. So you have to be very flexible and kind of go with a spirit of adventure and a good sense of humor. So there's always something new that I learn, and the one thing that I've learned is just to enjoy being in an indigenous area. A lot of times people go with me to indigenous areas, and if I'm not working, if I'm just going there on vacation, then they ask me, well, what are we supposed to do now? And I said one of the really nice things is that indigenous areas are usually in areas of natural beauty. So there's just places where you can just relax and enjoy the scenery, walk around and get to know the people, and the people are amazingly friendly and hospitable. I mean, if you go around at dinner time or lunchtime, there's always going to be someone to invite you in to eat with them. And that never fails to amaze me, is the willingness just to people walking by, oh, come in and have some food with us, have some drink with us.
Yeah, I've noticed, I spent a little bit of time as well in several of these areas, and I've noticed that time is a little bit different there.
Yes.
They don't necessarily follow the same sort of idea of time in a way, you know. So I see your point. Sometimes you just do nothing. You just sort of hang out and just enjoy the...
And that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. Yeah, we need to remember to do that from time to time.
Right.
So do you have, I mean, this is probably an impossible question to answer, but do you have a favorite spot out of all of these?
In this particular book, the areas that I've introduced, probably my favorite is Mudan Township. I've introduced 6 townships in this book. And Mudan Township is located in Pingdong, about a half an hour drive from Kending. So it's very nice. It's very nice in that way that you can go and you can have access to all of the tourism activities and beach activities in Kending, but you can stay overnight in Mudan and get away from all of the noise and the crowds and, again, just really enjoy the nature. So you can have sort of the best of both worlds when you visit that area.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Eric Smith. Tune in tomorrow for part 2 of my chat with author Cheryl Robbins only on ICRT's Taiwan Talk.
This is Taiwan Talk.
This is Taiwan Talk on ICRT.
Welcome to Taiwan Talk. I'm Eric Smith, and today we're chatting again with Taichung-based author, scholar, and tour guide Cheryl Robbins, who recently published A Foreigner's Travel Guide to Taiwan's Indigenous Areas. I spoke with Miss Robbins about the book, and I asked her about what's being done to preserve Taiwan's Aboriginal cultures and languages.
There are a lot of people who are working to preserve indigenous culture, but there's also a lot of forces that are working against that. For example, Typhoon Morakot. Typhoon Morakot forced many villages to move down to areas of lower elevation, meaning that they're now even closer to the mainstream society. So these kinds of events are speeding up the already pretty rapid disappearance of Taiwan's indigenous culture. So I panic, because I know if things don't change pretty soon, it won't be more than a few decades before this culture could be lost.
And just as far as population goes, we're already down to something in the neighborhood of 500,000 Aboriginal residents in Taiwan?
About 500,000, or about 2% of Taiwan's population.
And then, of course, we have the language issue, which is probably dying the fastest of any part of their cultures.
Yeah, because a lot of the young people, if you go to an indigenous village during the week, you will find it's very quiet because it's usually just elderly people and very small children. People in between, a lot of them are living in urban areas, to pursue education, to pursue work opportunities, because there aren't a lot of economic opportunities in the villages. So what has resulted is what we call lost generation, meaning that the language has not been passed down to this generation of people who are living outside in the cities. And language is an important part of the culture. If we lose the language, we lose the culture.
I think some people will probably be surprised to discover how many languages there are, and also the fact that they're not mutually understandable. Like one group doesn't understand the language of the other one. They're distinct, very separate languages.
Correct. Although they're all of the tribes, all 14 officially recognized tribes in Taiwan, fall under the Austronesian language family. It means they share some similarities. Mm-hmm. They have some words that cross over to most tribes. But just as you said, yes, in general conversation, they wouldn't be able to understand each other. There is that much of a difference. So when people say, "Oh, well, do you speak, indigenous language? How can I learn 14 of them?"
Right. So, are you hoping that members of Taiwan's international community, or just people in general, will, by reading the book, are you hoping to get people to go out and spend a night or spend a weekend there to not only support the groups economically, but...
Yes, well, that's exactly one of the purposes. Because it goes both ways. I think there are a lot of people in the international community who want to visit indigenous areas, but they just don't know where to get the information in English because there really isn't much. So this was one of the reasons for writing this book. Although it's available in both English and Chinese, the purpose was to provide some decent information in English for international travelers to be able to go on their own to indigenous villages if they want to. And yes, definitely to go there, to spend money, to learn about the culture, to learn about the issues that we talked about, the economic opportunity, the lack of economic opportunities in the villages. And hopefully this, more and more people, as awareness builds, maybe there will be more and more people who will come and help or provide resources.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of festivals or harvest events, and there are items on sale. And actually, I'm surprised to know that they are not cheap. But I think people need to appreciate the fact of just how special and how unique these items actually are, and recognize their value. Yeah,
actually, before I started writing books about travel to indigenous areas, I've been working for the last 5 or 6 years to promote indigenous handicrafts overseas through a website that I have, www.tribe-asia.com. But as you said, they're not cheap. But not only that they're special, that they're made by indigenous people, because they're handmade, so that takes a long time. So you have to factor in, the labor costs. And in Taiwan, labor costs are somewhat high, as well as obtaining some of the materials. Some of the materials can be obtained from nature, but some have to be purchased.
If you're looking for starry skies, fresh air, wonderfully hospitable people, and plenty of interesting adventures, check out Taiwan's indigenous areas. Miss Robbins' book is a great guide. Visit her website for more info at www.tribe-asia.com. Thanks for tuning in to Taiwan Talk. I'm Eric Smith.